Not only is it fall, it is October, which those of us who are slow cooker enthusiasts lovingly refer to as Crocktober. In this video, I'm going to share with you lots of slow cooker recipes that utilize an ingredient that many people shy away from when it comes to crockpot recipes, and that is pasta. Yes, you can cook pasta dishes using your slow cookers. I'm going to show you some of my favorite recipes that feature this inexpensive ingredient.
The first recipe that I want to share with you guys is a buffalo chicken tortellini, and man, was this fantastic. Everybody really liked this. It produced a couple helpings of leftovers. We ate it all. I will definitely be making it again. And here are the ingredients that I'm using. I'm going to use about 2 or 3 chicken breasts, some buffalo sauce, some minced garlic. You would need a packet of ranch dressing mix, but I make mine from scratch. You can find a video in my description box that tells you how I do that. So I'm going to use a couple tablespoons of that, salt and pepper to taste, cream cheese, shredded cheddar cheese, and tortellini, which we will add later, and then some chicken broth. So I'm actually going to put the chicken breast in the bottom of the crock pot, add a couple teaspoons of minced garlic, salt and pepper to taste, and then I used about 2 tablespoons, 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of my homemade ranch seasoning. And then I used about half of a bottle of buffalo sauce. That's just what I happened to have left. So it was probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of buffalo sauce. And I'm also going to add some chicken broth, but instead of using chicken broth, I just use this broth base, and then I add the appropriate amount of water. So I used about 1 tablespoon of this broth base, and then I added 3 cups of water, and I made sure that my 1/2 block of cream cheese was sitting on top of the rest of my ingredients, because I just want it to get soft in the cooking process and I can stir it in later. So I popped the lid on that, and I'm going to cook that on high for about 3 to 4 hours. You could cook this on low for 6 to 7 hours, just until your chicken is done cooking. I took the chicken out and I shredded that up, because I'm going to put that back in a little bit, but I wanted to take it out and shred it up. And I stirred the cream cheese into the rest of the ingredients. And then I added 1 bag of frozen tortellini. This is a 19-ounce bag of cheese tortellini. I find these at my Walmart for less than $3 a bag, and they're useful in so many different recipes. So I'm gonna just stir those into the crock pot along with the other ingredients, and just kind of make sure that they are submerged in the liquid that's in the crock pot. I didn't add my chicken back in yet. I'm gonna just set that aside. I'm gonna pop the lid back on this and let it cook for about 30 minutes, and then I will add my chicken back in, stir it all together, and add some shredded cheese. And I actually went ahead and just added the shredded cheese to everybody's plate, so that they could put the amount of cheese in that they wanted. I used a sharp cheddar. I'm sure that a Monterey Jack would be really good in this. A Pepperjack if you want even more of a kick, if the buffalo sauce doesn't give it a good kick. I really think this would be good with lots of different kinds of cheese. So here's what it looks like. I had some of the tortellini with a sprinkling of cheddar cheese on top, and I just served this with broccoli. And as I said, everybody liked this. It was really flavorful, so easy. I will definitely be making this again. It was a winner. We are going to have tonight a crock pot beef and noodles. In the crock pot already is 1 pound of stew meat, and stew meat is often just like a chuck roast or a shoulder roast that has been prepped for stew. It's already chopped up into little pieces. And then to that, I took the easy road today, and I seasoned this with a packet of onion soup mix that I already had in the pantry, a couple of teaspoons of beef broth base or beef bouillon, a couple of teaspoons of Worcestershire, and then I added about 5 cups or so of water to my crock pot, and that has been cooking on high now for a few hours. So now I'll show you what I'm adding to this to complete the meal. My beef is done cooking. Now I'm gonna finish this off by adding some of these Reams egg noodles. I would not do this with the dry egg noodles, you know, that like come in the package from the pasta aisle. I definitely think the fresh ones would be better. I mean, these came out of the freezer section. Obviously homemade ones would be even better, but I just don't have the time tonight. But I don't need this whole bag. I only need about 16 ounces, which is 2/3 of this bag. So I won't use this whole bag. I'll just use about 2/3 of it. I'll put those in there along with about probably 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of half and half. I'll put the lid back on and let those noodles cook there with the meat and the broth and the half and half. My mother grew up on a farm in northern Kansas, and I have heard stories about what a fabulous cook my Nana was, my mother's mom. I was not fortunate enough to know her because she passed away when I was really young, but this is actually inspired by a meal that she used to make, a beef and noodles. Of course, she made her chuck roast from scratch and her noodles from scratch, but she always served this over mashed potatoes, and I have heard my family talk about this meal time and time again. Okay, here it is, all plated up. I have already tried this and it is fantastic. It turned out great and it was so easy. Yummy.
Tonight, I am making a Nando's crock-pot peri chicken and pasta. I was not familiar with Nando's, but a little research showed me that it is a restaurant that began in South Africa, and they have started to open locations here in the US, though none in Oklahoma, but I've heard there are some in Texas. And the peri sauce is made from a particular kind of pepper, I think, that grows in that part of the world. So I was able to track some of the sauce down, and we're gonna make this delicious looking pasta dish all in the crock pot. In my slow cooker, I have 1.5 pounds of chicken breast. I'm gonna season this with a teaspoon of oregano, a couple of bay leaves, a little salt, a little pepper. 1 jar of this Nando's peri sauce. I don't know if it's Nando's or Nando's, but I was able to find this at my Whole Foods. And I purchased just the regular standard medium. They also had a garlic kind, and they had one that was hot, so it would be a little bit spicier. Get all that goodness out of there. 1 block of cream cheese, and then 4 cups of chicken broth, and I just made mine from Better Than Bouillon. The 4 cups would be 1 32-ounce carton. I'm gonna cover that and let it cook on low for about 6 hours until the chicken is done. My slow cooker cooks a little bit hot, so it only took about 5 hours for my chicken to cook to fork tender on low, and I've shredded that up and set it aside. Now I'm just giving the sauce and the cream cheese a stir in the pot to kind of break the cream cheese up and stir it all in. And I'm going to add direct to the slow cooker 1 pound of pasta. I'm using fusilli. I'm sure another shortcut pasta would work just fine. I'm gonna add my chicken back in, pop the lid back on, and it should take about 20 to 30 minutes for my pasta to cook completely on high. And then this will be ready to serve. I'm gonna finish it off with a little bit of grated mozzarella cheese and probably just a side salad or some steam in the bag veggies, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, this is super tasty, but it is spicy. And I got the medium peri sauce. So if you don't like as much spice, you might wanna look for the mild ones. I think they had a garlic one there. It might not be as spicy. This has definitely got a kick, but it's super tasty. My son has decided that he is a fan of chicken fettuccine or fettuccine style dishes, so we're gonna do a really easy chicken fettuccine in the crock pot, and it's gonna be a firecracker chicken fettuccine. It's gonna have a little bit of a kick because he also really likes spicy things. Not pictured are 3 very large chicken breasts, which are totally thawed. It's probably about 1.5 pounds of chicken breasts, so this is gonna be a pretty large recipe. In fact, I'm gonna use an entire pound of pasta when I would normally only use 8 to 12 ounces. So here I have the Auntie Nono's everything seasoning and the firecracker seasoning. I'm actually going to use a teaspoon of each of these to season this. I'm going to add this to my crock pot along with a couple teaspoons of minced garlic, 2 cups of chicken broth, which I'm just going to make from this Better Than Bouillon. And I'm also going to add about half this jar of sun-dried tomatoes. I'll just save the other half of the jar for another recipe. So these items I'm going to go ahead and get going in the crock pot with the chicken. I'm going to cook it on high for 3 to 4 hours, or you can cook it on low for 5 to 6 or 7 hours, depending on how long it takes the chicken to get done. And then these ingredients we're actually going to add later after the chicken has cooked. So I have a pound of linguine. I have some Parmesan cheese. I would actually normally use about 1 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, but I have this Parmesan and then this Romano, which I had purchased for a different recipe that I ended up not making for another video a while back. So I'm actually going to use half and half Parmesan and Romano. I will grate that myself. And then I also have some half and half. I'm going to need 2 cups of this later on. You could use just 1 cup of heavy cream, and then you could increase your chicken broth to 3 cups instead of 2, because my rule for cooking pasta in the crock pot or in a 1-pot dish is 2 to 1 water to pasta. But I have the half and half, and there's about 2 cups left in here, so it's going to be great. We'll use that up. But again, all of these things are getting added later. These are the things we're going to go ahead and get in the crock pot and get the chicken cooking, and then we'll finish it out whenever it's closer to dinner time. So I'll show you what that looks like once the chicken
is done cooking. My chicken is definitely done. I'm going to take it out and shred it up, and then I'm going to pour in 2 cups of half and half. I'm going to put my linguine in and then put the shredded chicken back on top. I'll pop the lid back on and let the pasta cook for about 20 minutes on high, and then we'll be ready to stir in the cheese. Tonight I am making a beef and veggie noodle casserole, and this is essentially a one-pot recipe. It's just that the one pot is my crock pot. Or actually it's my Instant Pot Aura slow cooker, because I make the beef and veggie mixture and let it simmer in the crock pot, and then at the very end before we're ready to serve it, I throw in the egg noodles that complete the meal. So let me show you how I'm doing that. I have my Instant Pot Aura slow cooker here, and I have it set to the saute function. And right now I am browning 1.5 pounds of ground beef with 1 onion chopped. I used my little rotary chopper to chop up the onion. I've got those both sauteing here together. To season this, the recipe calls for a teaspoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of garlic salt, a teaspoon of parsley, 2 teaspoons of paprika, which is about all I have left in here, so I need to add that to the list. A teaspoon of salt. I usually just say salt and pepper to your taste. A teaspoon of pepper. I'm just going to add some fresh cracked black pepper. And now I'm going to add a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. You could use 2 8-ounce cans, which are the little bitty cans. The recipe calls for 1 12-ounce package of frozen mixed vegetables, but I don't have any frozen. I do have canned, so I'm gonna put in a couple of cans of mixed vegetables. I did drain the liquids out of these. And then 1.5 cups of beef broth. And this is actually broth that was rendered whenever I made a roast about a month back, and I froze the leftover broth so that I could use it later on. So I'm just going to use some of that along with just a little bit of water probably in here. I'm gonna give this a stir. I'm gonna pop the lid on and I'm gonna let it cook on low for about 5 hours until I'm ready to finish it up with the noodles and the cheese. This has been simmering on low for about 5 hours now, and everything in here was cooked to begin with, so it just needed to kind of simmer together. And so now I'm going to add 8 ounces of egg noodles, which is about half of this 16-ounce bag. And I'm going to stir in 1.5 cups of milk. And then I am actually bumping this to high because I find that my Instant Pot Aura cooks a little bit lower. It seems like the temperature doesn't always come up as high as my CROCKPOT brand slow cooker. So I'm gonna make sure that all of these noodles are submerged. I'm bumping the temperature up to high. Gonna pop the lid back on and then check on this in about 20 to 30 minutes. It just needs to come up to a simmer and kind of cook those noodles through before we add the cheese to finish it off. The only thing that I do not like about the Instant Pot Aura is that I feel like the slow cook temperatures are lower. I don't know why, but I feel like things don't cook as fast, or they don't come up to temperature like they should, which is why I mostly use this to cook things with ingredients that are already cooked, you know, things that just need to simmer. But I was having trouble getting this to come up to a decent temperature on high to cook the noodles, but what I will do to fix that is put it back on the saute function, and it will basically bring it to a simmer really, really quickly. So I can give this a stir once the saute function has kicked in and it's kind of, you know, simmering a little bit. I can give that a stir and then bump it back down to cooking it on high, the high slow cook function. And that way it's already kind of up to temperature and it can finish cooking the noodles that way. This is looking and smelling very, very good right now. So the final step is to stir in 2 cups of mozzarella cheese, which is what I'm going to do. I imagine that other kinds of cheese would work fine for this, and then we will be ready to serve it. Okay, you guys, this is basically it. This recipe is chicken broth, a package of ranch dressing mix, and normally I make this myself, but when I opened up my refrigerator and looked at my little jar that I keep my homemade mix in, I didn't have enough for this recipe. So thankfully I had one of these hanging out in my pantry, so I'll just use that today. A tablespoon of minced garlic, 1 package of cream cheese, 1 8-ounce block of cream cheese. Sometimes I just use half, and 4 cups of chicken broth, but I usually just use 4 cups of water and then I add a tablespoon or 2 of this broth base in there. That's basically it. You throw that into the crock pot and you cook it until the chicken's done, and then you shred it up. And I always put the cream cheese just right on top so that it gets soft and melty and it's easy to stir in. And then you come back to the crock pot after that's done and you throw in 8 ounces of spaghetti and let it cook on high for another 30 minutes, and voila, you have some creamy ranch chicken spaghetti in the crock pot. Now I'm getting a little bit of a late start on this today, so I'm actually gonna let it cook on high for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then I will bump it down to low for the rest of the time until I'm ready to add in the pasta. That's a trick I use sometimes with crock pot recipes if I'm getting a late start, because I would normally cook things on low. I mean, it is a slow cooker. I want things to cook slow, but if I'm pressed for time, I'll cook it on high for a little while just to give it a jump start, and then I'll bump it down to low to finish cooking. Okay, so the chicken is done cooking. I have shredded it up and I've stirred in the cream cheese, and it's not much to look at right now, but now I'm going to add 8 ounces of spaghetti. I weighed this out on my scale so that it would be, you know, close to 8 ounces, but that's about half of a 1-pound box. And I just go ahead and make sure that it's submerged. That's why I like to go ahead and break the spaghetti up into small pieces, but I'm gonna make sure that that is kind of submerged in all of the liquid. And I'm gonna put the lid back on and let it cook on high until the noodles are done. Into my crock pot, I'm putting about 1 pound of shaved steak. This is beef shaved steak. You can see it's very thin. I'm putting it in with my tongs so that it kind of falls apart as I put it in and gets torn into little pieces. That's actually what I want. I was going to use stew meat, which is already chopped up, and stew meat does really well in crock pot dishes because it cooks low and slow and usually gets very tender, so I would definitely use that if I had not seen this at Aldi. I just thought, you know, that it would be really good in this particular recipe, so I'm gonna get this in the bottom of the crock pot here. Now I'm going to add a heaping tablespoon of garlic. I know that this already minced garlic isn't as flavorful as mincing or pressing fresh garlic, but it sure does come in handy whenever I am tight on time. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. I'll probably use 3. The original recipe calls for oyster sauce. I do not have any, so I'm actually going to use some hoisin sauce. I know it's a different flavor. It's a little bit sweeter than the oyster sauce would be, but I actually kind of am thinking that I will want that in this dish, so I'm going to use about 1.5 tablespoons of that. I'm also out of red pepper flake, I realized, which is crazy. So I'm gonna use a tablespoon of this chili garlic sauce to add a little bit of heat to this. About 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. I'm not gonna measure that, I'm just gonna sprinkle it over. Boop. Salt and pepper to taste. Since I'm using soy sauce and beef broth in this, I'm not gonna put too much extra salt in it. This is pepper. 4 cups of beef broth, plus 1 to 2 cups of water, depending on how brothy you're going to want your soup to be. I'm actually gonna stir that just a little bit. I want my thinly sliced beef to be kind of floating around in there. I don't want it to be stuck together. And I'm gonna pop the lid on and let this slow cook for about 6 hours until the beef is tender, and it's gonna make this really delicious broth as well to cook our ramen in here in a little bit. This has been cooking on low for 6 hours. I tasted the beef. It is very tender and flavorful. See that thin beef? It just made really little beef strips throughout the broth. And now I am going to add 4 bricks of this rice ramen. You could use just regular ramen, that's what I would use, but I have this in the pantry and I use this all the time to make other ramen dishes. I get it from Thrive Market. It's really, really good. So I'm gonna drop this in and pop the lid back on, and I just need the ramen to cook through. It should only take, you know, 20 minutes or so, maybe even less than that. I'll probably check on it after about 15 minutes. I'm gonna keep my crock pot on low, and then this will be ready to serve up. I finished mine off with some green onion and a little bit of everything but the bagel seasoning. I also threw some steamed broccoli into my bowl, and this is so good. The broth is really flavorful. The meat is really tender. I mean, look how thin that shaved beef is.
So you're able to get just a little bit of it in every single bite. This is a winner in my book. I'm gonna make a hamburger helper, just kind of the tried and true cheeseburger mac, but I'm going to do it solely in my slow cooker. So right now I am browning 1 pound of ground beef here in this slow cooker on the saute function. And this one even has the ability to let you adjust the saute temperature. So if you want to saute something on a little bit lower temperature, or you want to sear something at a higher temperature, you can do this with this slow cooker. To season this, I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I like to keep it easy. Just keep it all the same in this one. Normally I would use an 8-ounce can, a little can of tomato sauce, but I don't have any in the pantry. So instead I'm gonna use about 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, and I'm just gonna add an extra ½ cup of water or so to make up the difference. I also like to add a pinch of red pepper flake, like maybe 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. You can leave that out if you don't like the kick, if your family doesn't like spicy stuff. Plus 2 cups of water. And like I said, an additional ½ cup or so for me, since I'm using tomato paste instead of tomato sauce. I am going to pop the lid on this and switch it over to the high slow cook setting. And we're gonna come back and finish it up later. This has been going for about 2 hours now, and it smells amazing. So I'm going to stir in 2 cups of milk, and I did heat the milk up in the microwave for like 30 seconds or so, just so that it wouldn't be ice cold when I added it to my slow cooker. And 2 cups of elbow macaroni. I'm just gonna stir this up until the macaroni is submerged in the liquid. I'm gonna pop the lid back on, and I'm gonna keep this on high, and the pasta should be cooked in about 20 to 30 minutes, and all I will have to do is stir in about 1 to 2 cups of cheese. Cheddar would be great, but I'm probably just gonna use a hodgepodge of what I have lying around in the refrigerator, and it'll be ready to go. I am working on a crock pot smoked sausage pasta. This recipe is coming from Lazy Day Cooking Club. I've talked about them a lot. I'll leave more information in the description box below. I did have to make a few changes to it though, based on the ingredients that I had on hand and just what I thought would work well with my crock pots. So in my slow cooker, I have 1 package of smoked sausage chopped, about ½ of a yellow onion chopped, 1 can of fire roasted tomatoes. I put in about 1 teaspoon of garlic powder because I'm out of fresh garlic, and salt and pepper to taste, and then about 3 cups of chicken broth, which I just make from water and chicken bouillon. Now, because I'm getting this going a little later in the day, I have to cook this on high. And Carrie's recipe from Lazy Day calls for milk in this recipe. It calls for 2 cups of chicken broth and 1 cup of milk. And that's why she recommends, I think, that you cook it on low and not on high. So since I need to cook mine on high, so it'll be done in time, I'm just gonna use chicken broth, and I'll add like a little bit of heavy cream at the end. And we're also gonna add some pasta and some cheese. We're gonna cook the pasta right in the slow cooker with everything else, so just sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So just, I was gonna say hold on, but really for you, it's gonna be probably the very next clip. For me, it's gonna be a few hours. For you, it's just a few seconds. After 3 hours on high, I stirred in 1 pound, 16 ounces of pasta, and I added just about a ½ cup more of water just to be sure that it had enough liquid to cook in. And da-da-da-da! Here it is. I give you the magic of the slow cooker. It's like the pasta is cooked to perfection for me. And what I'm gonna do now is stir in about a ½ cup of cream, maybe just 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup, 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup, whatever that would be, to add some of the richness into this that was not included for having left out the milk, since I didn't use any milk in this, like the recipe originally called for. And 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese. I'm just gonna stir this all together, pop the lid back on so that the cheese melts, and it'll be ready to serve here in about 5 minutes. Since I am kind of late getting dinner together tonight, I put out some fresh veggies for everybody to munch on. So this is it for dinner tonight. I didn't do any veggies or sides to go along with it. It's just a, you know, 1 pot, 1 bowl meal. Yum. The meal that I am preparing for tonight is one that we have had before. It is a crock pot pepperjack beef and noodles. So I actually already have my ground beef here in the pot browning. I'm going to put that into the crock pot along with some diced onion and minced garlic, a can of diced tomatoes with green chilies,
a can of tomato sauce, and because I do not have Pepperjack cheese, I thought I had Pepperjack cheese, but when I took it out of the refrigerator, it was moldy. So real life, sometimes that happens, guys. It happens to us all. I'm going to improvise, and instead I'm going to use just a little bit of crushed red pepper and some diced green pepper, which I have in my fridge and needed to use up anyway, and salt and pepper. And then I will add 3 cups of beef broth, but I do not buy beef broth. I just use broth base with the appropriate amount of water. So I'll add 3 cups of water and probably about 1.5 tablespoons of broth base. I will let that cook on low for about 5 hours or so, and then I will come back and add my bag of egg noodles, let those cook about 20 minutes, and then stir in some cheese, and I will show you guys what it looks like when it's done. It was fantastic the last time we had it, so I'm looking forward to having it again. And here it is, all plated up. It turned out fantastic. I actually think it tastes even better with the fresh green pepper in there. I'm just serving this with a side of roasted veggies, but this was a hit again. It smelled delicious as it was cooking. It was easy just to toss in the noodles at the end. So this is a winner for me. Baked ziti is one of those quintessential family-friendly meals that I think hardly ever fails. I mean, it's really versatile. You can make it with meat, you can make it without meat, you can use different kinds of cheeses, different kinds of pastas, you can make your sauce from scratch, you can use a jar sauce. There's so many different ways that you can make baked ziti, plus it's typically kid-friendly. So I don't think that a crock-pot pasta recipe compilation would be complete without a baked ziti recipe for the slow cooker. This is truly a one-pot crock-pot meal because I have a slow cooker with a saute function. So I am browning up 1 pound of ground beef. And a lot of slow cookers are adding this function. I had one that was from Instant Pot called the Instant Pot Aura before, and it was pretty good. They discontinued it, but I actually think this one from Cuisinart is better. The slow cook functions function better for me on this Cuisinart slow cooker than the comparable model in the Instant Pot brand. But it has 3 cooking functions, a slow cook, both high and low. I've got it on brown saute right now, and then it also has a steaming function, which I haven't tried out yet, but it's actually really great for rice dishes. If they still have this one on Amazon, I'll leave it linked in the description box below, but definitely worth it if you can find one. At least in my opinion, it's worth it to keep your slow cooker dishes like one-pot meals to find a slow cooker that has a saute function. I've already switched this over to the slow cook function, so it's going to cool off and stop simmering, especially as we add the other ingredients. This right here is homemade spaghetti sauce seasoning. It is a mixture of dried minced onions, garlic powder, parsley, basil thyme, oregano. I just keep this along with some other spice mix seasonings taped inside of a cabinet. I'm gonna add 1 can of diced tomatoes. Actually, these are fire roasted tomatoes. I really meant to use regular ones, but that's okay. They're already in there. It'll be fine. And 1 jar of regular pasta sauce. This is a 24-ounce jar, so I'm going to fill it up with water, which is the equivalent of 3 cups, and I'm going to pour that in here as well and pop the lid on. And since I'm getting this started later in the day, it's about 3 o'clock, I'm going to let it simmer on high for about 2 to 3 hours before we add the pasta. My sauce has been simmering for about 2.5 hours. It actually just kicked over to warm about 20 minutes ago, so I kicked it back up to high. And now I'm going to stir in 1 pound of pasta. These are bow ties. Penne or rotini or fusilli I think would work just fine as well, but kind of like a short, medium, size pasta. Oops. Made a mess. This is why I'll never have my own cooking show on the Food Network, among many other reasons. Before I put the lid back on, I'm gonna add one more thing. This is a mixture of cottage cheese, about 1 cup, and then about 1 cup of grated or shredded mozzarella. I think actually it's an Italian mixture, so it's like mozzarella, provolone, maybe Parmesan. I'm gonna just spoon this mixture in little piles, drop little balls of it all over the place. And then I'm gonna pop the lid back on and let this cook on high until the pasta is done. It usually takes, for this kind of pasta, anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes, right around 30 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. Just try to kind of keep my eye on it. This is done. The only thing I'm gonna do is power off my
slow cooker, and I am going to sprinkle a layer of cheese over the top and pop the lid back on for just a couple of minutes. It only takes a few minutes for this layer of cheese to melt, and then it will be ready to serve up. I've got a little side salad to go along with it, and this smells so good. Can't wait to dive into this. More slow cooker content headed your way this Crocktober. Pick out one of these videos to watch next, and I'll see you there.